Well, it didn't happen on draft night the way many of us wanted it to, but the Sacramento Kings finally made a trade, and this deal hopefully is a precursor to more moves or bigger moves that need to happen. We'll break down this deal. Plus, the Kings signed 2 undrafted free agents. I'll share with you who they are right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. Time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And for weeks leading up to the draft, I was calling for a move to be made. Hey, trade the 13th overall pick. Make a move on draft night to improve this roster. Well, I guess technically Monty McNair kind of listened because he did make a move on draft night. It was just night 2, or I guess day 2 of the NBA draft for the first time this year. Round 2 was on the day after round 1, and it wasn't in the Barclays Center. It was, I guess, in the ESPN studios in New York City. So certainly some getting used to there, but the Kings didn't have to worry about making a selection with the 45th overall pick in the draft because they ended up trading that pick away as part of a package that went to the Toronto Raptors. The trade was the Kings sent Davion Mitchell, Sasha Vezenkov, and 2 second rounders, including pick 45, to Toronto for Jalen McDaniels, not Jaden McDaniels, very different player. Jalen McDaniels is the player that the Kings acquired. I'll share with you, we're going to break down this deal and what really matters about this deal and why the Kings would likely make this deal. I'm getting into all that in just a second. Let's talk about the players in this trade first. And before we get to Jalen McDaniels and the actual player that the Kings acquired, let's talk about Davion Mitchell and Sasha Vezenkov really quick. We'll talk about Davion first. I am excited to see Davion get a fresh start in Toronto. I think Davion has a lot to offer a team. We know how dynamic he is on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, he showed good growth, especially towards the end of last season when he was getting more consistent playing time. He was showing what he can do defensively while offensively having some big moments. Remember, in Game 2 of the playoffs 2 years ago or 2 seasons ago now, when the Sacramento Kings took a 2-0 lead on the Golden State Warriors, Davion Mitchell had a fantastic game that night, but the biggest moment I think of his Kings career was hitting that corner 3 to pretty much put that game on ice or put the dagger in the Warriors' hearts that night. Davion had some good moments, some solid moments. And one thing I will always be able to say about the guy is that he works his absolute butt off. He is a guy that you have to lock the gym, bar it, close all the windows, do everything in your power to keep the dang thing closed so that Davion can't go in and overwork himself and work too much. He's a guy that you have to keep out of the gym instead of try and convince him to get into the gym more, which is always a better problem to have. He's an absolute workhorse. He's a gym rat. He loves basketball through and through, dedicated to improving his game. So the work ethic of Davion could never, ever, ever be questioned. And I admire that. I appreciate that. And I think with the consistent playing time that he will hopefully be getting with the Toronto Raptors, he'll be able to blossom more into the player that I think the Kings were hopeful he would be when they had drafted him, I think 3 drafts ago now. So best of luck to Davion. I'm already expecting when the Kings and Toronto Raptors play each other for the first time, Davion Mitchell is going to maybe put the clamps on De'Aaron, Malik, whoever the case may be. I expect Davion Mitchell to be pretty engaged and pretty active defensively against Sacramento that night as a little bit of revenge. Let's put it that way. Sasha Vezenkov. Look, the fit didn't work. right? Sasha Vezenkov fit who the Sacramento Kings were 2 seasons ago, not who the Kings were last season. The Kings were going in more of a defensive direction, looking for more versatility, someone who can give them good impact on both ends of the floor. And while Sasha, with his EuroLeague MVP success and his incredible three-point shot and offensive ability, while there were certainly things about his game that were enticing, he just did not fit the direction the Sacramento Kings were going, and it was made pretty obvious by not just how Mike played him and used him in his rotation, but kind of how Mike talked about him. Not that Mike had any kind of issue with Sasha Vezenkov or anything beyond just he did not feel that Sasha was good enough or was the right kind of player for the Sacramento Kings, what they were trying to do, and where they were trying to go. I also think, to some extent, and I went into this in great detail earlier this offseason, I don't know if Sasha really truly got the full fair shot that he deserved. Like, I hope he gets that in Toronto. I don't know. Now that the Kings have traded him, I don't know if he plans on finishing out his contract, or hopefully he honors his contract and goes to Toronto. He's under contract for 2 more years, 1 year guaranteed, the other one a team option. So who knows what the Raptors are going to do with Sasha going forward. That's their problem to figure out. But in Sacramento, he never really got a full, I think, fair shot to be the best version of himself to help the Sacramento Kings win. That being said, in defense of the Kings, when he started getting consistent playing time and he was playing decently well, he got hurt. And after he got hurt, the Kings kind of moved on out of necessity. They have to. I mean, no rest for the wicked type thing. You got to keep going. Nobody feels sorry for you. And Sasha kind of got left behind after getting hurt. So I'm not saying the Kings handled the Sasha Vezenkov situation perfectly at all. I think Sasha would admit that. I think the Kings would admit that. I think the whole thing just didn't work. It didn't work out. Unfortunately, Sasha was like the biggest acquisition that the Sacramento Kings had last offseason, the guy that was going to be the biggest new game changer with this roster. Very quickly, he wasn't that. And Sasha, in many ways, epitomizes what the Sacramento Kings tried to do and failed to do last season. So I wish him the best in Toronto, and hopefully he can still salvage something or find something and find a spot in the NBA for his career going forward. All right, now let's talk about the player that the Kings did get. Jalen McDaniels, 6'9" forward, coming off of a terrible, and I mean terrible, offensive season, especially shooting the basketball. He shot 44% from the field, 34% from the field, 16% from three-point range, and 73% from the foul line. I mean, the 16% from three is really, really bad. But 34% from the field, period, when solid is like high 40s. Like, that's really, really bad. Now, to be fair, that's 1 season of McDaniels' career. Over the course of his career, he averages 44% from the field, 32% from three-point range, 77% from the free throw line. Still not great, but better than the shooting splits and the numbers from last year. He does have a solid defensive ability. He has the size. He has the length. Look, he adds a body of the 6'9" category. He adds wing depth, which is good. Now, I don't know if we can look at Jalen McDaniels any better than, I guess we look at like Kessler Edwards on this roster right now, someone with defensive upside who offensively is a pretty significant question mark. I don't expect Jalen McDaniels to have that significant of an impact in terms of playing time on this Sacramento Kings team. To me, Jalen McDaniels, you add him as a body and depth in a position of need, but he's not what this trade is about. This trade is purely financial. This trade is about money. Money with a purpose. In this trade, the Sacramento Kings are now $7 million under the luxury tax threshold. Now, quick explanation of what the luxury tax is if you don't know. The luxury tax is in place to try and keep as much competitive balance as possible, right? So teams can't just pay and buy super teams. When you reach the luxury tax, you pay a penalty to the league that is a percentage of your total salary. So the amount of money that you go over the luxury tax, you pay a percentage of that, and it can end up being a pretty hefty annual bill that you have to pay in order to keep these teams together. Now, to some extent, there's the expectation, and I think in the Kings' case, there should be the expectation of, with the way the West is right now and the value of contracts and more stars getting close to max money or significant money, you kind of have to be willing to go into the luxury tax if you want to be competitive right now. We have the new TV contracts for the NBA that are coming up. That's going to raise the salary cap. So being in the luxury tax today might not necessarily mean you're in the luxury tax tomorrow type thing. And I mean, today and tomorrow is years, this year versus next year. But of course, with the TV contracts going up, that means max contracts and player salaries are only going to go up. So it's kind of expected that you're going to dabble into the luxury tax a little bit, especially if you're trying to pay a homegrown or home-developed team. The Kings have to worry about paying Keegan Murray coming up. They have to worry about a max contract for De'Aaron Fox coming up in a couple of years. So going into the luxury tax is kind of an expectation. So they're $7 million under the luxury tax now after making this deal. However, they are almost $15 million under the first apron of the luxury tax. Now, luxury tax aprons are in place further to establish kind of that competitive balance, right? Because there might be an owner out there, like a billionaire, like Steve Ballmer, for example, that goes, I don't care about luxury tax. I'll pay what needs to be paid to buy a championship. I don't care. Go and get me all the guys. I will pay the luxury tax bill. I'll handle it myself. Just get me a title. There might be guys out there that feel that way. It's like Manchester City or Manchester United in the European Premier League. And in the way in soccer, it's just if you have a wealthy owner, they can just buy and have a massive payroll, and there's nothing you can do about it, and they typically win the league every single year. The NBA wants to avoid that. So these aprons are in place to where when you cross these aprons, for example, when you cross the first apron, you're now restricted on the moves that you can make until you get back under that apron. For example, if you cross over that first apron, you cannot execute a sign and trade that keeps you over that apron. So if you execute a sign and trade, you essentially have to be trading away the salary to drop you back underneath. There's no sign and trade that you could execute. Let's use Paul George as an example. It's a bad example because he's going to make a boatload of money. But Paul George agrees to sign a $40 million per year deal with the Los Angeles Clippers, but they're going to trade that deal to Sacramento. Well, if Sacramento's already over that apron by $1 million, they're over that apron. That means they have to send out $41 million a year in salary in order to properly do that to get themselves under the apron, or they can't make that deal. Another example of that is, let's say the buyout market, right? This doesn't really play a factor into the Sacramento Kings too much because they're not the LA Lakers and these other teams that can just get talent in the buyout market. But let's say the Kings were, again, $1 million over the first luxury tax apron, right? And I don't know, Drew Holiday suddenly becomes available in the buyout market. And we're talking years from now or whatever. I don't know. It's a bad example, but just roll with me here. Drew Holiday is suddenly available in the buyout market. He's willing to sign with the Sacramento Kings on a veteran minimum deal to help the Kings win a title and win a ring here. Again, bad example, but just keep going with me here. The Kings cannot execute, they cannot agree to sign a player at the buyout market while they are over that first luxury tax apron. So it stops you from continuing to buy, and get more players and build up an even bigger luxury tax bill. Then there's a second apron on top of that, and the Kings are like 20-something million or something like that under that second apron. Those restrictions get even worse. We don't even have to worry about those and talk about those at this point in time. But the Kings essentially now have roughly more like $14.5 million that they can use before crossing that first luxury tax apron. If you go into the luxury tax and are paying somewhat of a luxury tax bill, but you're under that first apron, you're still in a pretty good spot. So by making this trade, not only do the Kings free up a roster spot by trading two guys for one, the Sacramento Kings have now given themselves around $14 million before they hit the luxury tax apron to go out and execute a trade or to add a talent in free agency or whatever the case may be. So this is a move about a buzzword for Monty McNair, which is flexibility. This move gives the Kings more flexibility to make another move. That's what this trade is about. On paper, trading a former lottery pick, a EuroLeague MVP, and 2 second-rounders for, if we're being honest, more than likely a bench-warming forward/wing in Jalen McDaniels. It's not a good trade. But you have to give up assets in order to convince a team like Toronto, who has cap space, to absorb that extra payroll into theirs to free you up to make more moves on top of that. You have to give up assets. Now, maybe 2 second-rounders, Davion and Sasha, was too much to give up. But in reality, none of us are going to care if the Kings use this money properly to go out and improve this roster. But that's a big if, right? If you have hesitations, if you have concerns based off the fact that we've gone through 2 trade deadlines and last offseason without Monty making any of those significant moves that we've been waiting for him to make, I get it. The Kings have to use this money that they freed up. Monty McNair logically does not make this move just to put the Kings under the luxury tax, so Vivek doesn't have to pay a luxury tax bill. It doesn't make sense. If they truly want to be competitive and want to put their money where their mouth is, that they're not making the move for that reason. They still have 7 guards on this roster now. It dropped down from 8 to 7 because Davion Mitchell is bye-bye. They still have 7 guards on this roster, and in reality, still 2 really serviceable wings. Everybody else is like a journeyman or I don't know. So the Kings still have work to do. This has opened up opportunity for them to do it, and now they just got to do it. So I'm not grading this trade necessarily because it's inconclusive or it's incomplete. The Kings need to do more from this, and I expect that's exactly what they're going to do in the time coming here still this offseason. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Game Time. One of the best ways to kill the summer months of the offseason is to go and watch some Major League Baseball. And Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the MLB, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on Game Time actually go down the closer that you get to first pitch, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and the lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. I have used Game Time to buy MLB tickets firsthand. I've done it multiple times. The first time I ever did it, I was in San Francisco during the Kings and Warriors playoff series. Last minute, decided to get some tickets on Game Time to go and watch the San Francisco Giants take on the New York Mets. Ended up sitting, I think, 15 rows off the field behind the Giants dugout for like 60% less than the going rate for those tickets because I bought them last minute on Game Time. They have last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying. You have flash deals that you can save even more with exclusive game by game deals that Game Time comes up with you. All in pricing, meaning you can turn on a feature so you know exactly what you're paying when you click on that seat. No hidden fees and nothing like that where, oh, these tickets are $40 a piece. Okay, I'm going to get 2 of them. That's $80. But when you check out, it's actually $115 with all these hidden layered fees. Nah, none of that. Game Time tells you exactly what the prices are going to be up front, so you're not surprised. They have the most accurate and panoramic seat views, which are especially great for if you're buying massive stadium concert tickets or football tickets or whatever the case may be. And the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find tickets in the same area at a lower price. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So the Sacramento Kings did not have a draft pick today. Made the second round overall pretty irrelevant for the Kings. The biggest moment of the second round didn't have anything to do with the Kings, but it was Bronny James being drafted by the Los Angeles Lakers. Get your jokes off. I know we naturally hate the Lakers here on Locked On Kings, and even if you're not a LeBron James fan, I know it's easy to talk about nepotism and low-hanging fruit and Bronny doesn't deserve that opportunity and blah, 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 blah. Regardless, I'm a fan of history, and I think I have a son of my own, so the idea of having a father and son duo playing together in the NBA at the same time, it's pretty dope. Like I think of what Ken Griffey and Ken Griffey Jr. were in the MLB, right? Although Ken Griffey Jr. was a phenomenal player and Bronny probably has a ways to go, right? regardless, I think it's cool. I think it's historic, and that was like the biggest storyline of the day for the round 2 of the playoffs. But, round 2 of the draft. After the draft was over, as usual, we have our blitz of undrafted free agents that are signed. And the Kings signed 2 undrafted free agents. Before I get into these guys, just a friendly reminder for those who I don't care, they're undrafted free agents, how good can they be? Keon Ellis was an undrafted free agent in the Keegan Murray draft. The Kings signed Keon Ellis right after the draft ended, and look what he turned into, a starting caliber shooting guard for the Sacramento Kings team. So I'm just saying, you don't have to know exactly who these guys are and worship them like they're NBA players and saviors to a franchise. I don't think every single one is going to turn into the type of player that Keon Ellis was. One of the best parts about these sign and trade opportunities, these unrestricted or signed free agents, undrafted free agents, easy for me to, listen to me, I sound like Joe Biden in the presidential debate, yikes. These undrafted free agents get to choose where they go, right? And in this case, these 2 undrafted free agents obviously had interest from the Sacramento Kings, but made good decisions because they're 2 wings going to an organization that needs more wing depth. Let's start with Isaiah Crawford, forward out of Louisiana Tech, has a 6'6" wingspan he's 6'6" frame with a 7-foot wingspan. He is 22 years old. Reading about him, watching him, talking to people about him, he has high defensive upside. That's probably the biggest attribute to his game, is what he can be on the defensive end. Some people use the word elite defensive potential. I had one word that I saw and heard repeatedly where people almost calling him like a pest on the defensive end. He's just someone that if he's guarding you, he's going to bother you. He's going to annoy you. He's going to get under your skin. Not meaning he's a dirty player in any kind of way, but he's just going to annoy you and not let you get comfortable with the basketball. The Kings certainly need more of that. So those were the words that were used to describe Crawford. Last season, he averaged 16 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and 2 steals a game. That is a freaking stat line, right? Again, he put up these numbers at Louisiana Tech. He's a two-way player. Or he's signing a 2-way contract with the Kings, one of their 3 2-way spots. So don't take these numbers and expect these at the NBA level, right? But it shows he's versatile, and again, his biggest strength is on the defensive end. But like we talked about, the Kings are looking for guys that can be versatile, that can make impacts on both ends. Well, offensively, he shot 49% from the field, 41% from three-point range, 72% from the free throw line last season. So Isaiah Crawford, really liked this signing. The more research I did about him, the more that I liked him. Then the other undrafted free agent that the Kings signed today on another 2-way deal is Washington State forward Isaac Jones. Now, he's a little bit bigger than Crawford. He's 6'9" with a 7'3" wingspan. So this is a big dude. He's also older. He will turn 24 next month. You're looking for an immediate impact player with an NBA body. He's not that much younger than De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis, right? So this is a guy that he's built. He's ready. He's matured into who he is and how he's built as a basketball player. He is considered to be a pretty solid interior scorer. He has the ability to score facing the basket, score a little bit in the post, a little bit of a mid-range jump shot. Someone who is pretty good offensively around the rim, but completely lacks perimeter shooting. Like zero offensive game outside of the mid-range and certainly outside of the three-point shot. Like just he does not have a jumper. He's on the bigger side and the slower side. He's more of a true power forward than he is a wing. In fact, he's probably more of a 4-5. Now, he's undersized for being a 5 or a center, but the wingspan certainly helps with that. But he's kind of bigger, slower. Talked about how he has these kind of big, long legs or big, thick legs, I should say, and solid base. So he's kind of hard to push around the block. A physical presence. He averaged 15 points, 7 rebounds, and a block a game for Washington State. His shooting splits 57% from the field. You love that. Again, he's getting a lot of his buckets in and around the rim. Just a 7% three-point shooter on a almost non-existent volume. Like shot basically a quarter of a three-point shot a game. So he does not shoot threes. He does not have any kind of offensive game beyond the perimeter, which is, I don't know how that works out for the Sacramento Kings. If he has a long-term role with the Kings, maybe that's something he's going to work to develop in the GU League and as a two-way player. 71% free throw shooter though, so that's pretty good for his size. The Kings now have 2 of their 3 two-way slots filled. I know they have 2 other guys that were on two-way contracts last year that are still with the organization. Jalen Slauson was one of them. He was the second-round pick last year, along with Colby Jones. And Jordan Ford, Folsom Zone, local boy here in Sacramento. Jay Ford, I have to imagine, out of the 2, is probably the odd man out. I don't know if the Kings decide on bringing Slauson back and giving Slauson another opportunity, a second year as a two-way player. Haven't heard anything. Don't really know. I know he made strides and showed some growth. Maybe they give him the opportunity in the California Classic coming up and in Summer League to prove it a little bit. But I think if I had to put my money on it, those would be the 3, Slauson, Crawford, and Jones, with Jordan Ford being the odd man out. But I have no idea. That's just pure speculation on my part. But do yourself a favor. Look up these 2 guys, especially look at Isaiah Crawford. I think you're going to like Isaiah Crawford and what he potentially brings to the table for the Kings. So naturally, on yesterday's Locked On Kings podcast, spent a lot of time talking about Devin Carter and the Kings selecting him at 13. And I share with you how initially my reaction to the pick was pretty negative, not because of Devin Carter, but because of the position and the Kings not trading the pick and not using that opportunity to address their wing depth and add more of a veteran talent. And it grew on me more and more and more, to where the majority of yesterday's podcast that I did, recording from the Golden One Center at 10 o'clock at night, was pretty positive. And I've seen your responses to it over the course of today. Some of you like the trade. Some of you agree with me. Some of you are like the draft pick. Some of you are coming around to it as I came around to it a little bit. Some of you can't stand it. Don't like it. Think it was a mistake by Monte McNair and the Sacramento Kings. That's fine. We talked about how the Kings felt that with all the options available to them, Carter was the best selection for them to ultimately accomplish their goal. They felt that no matter all the other available routes to them were not worth it or were not better for the Kings than drafting Carter. That means they probably have a pretty good belief in what Carter can be. I don't think they're looking at Carter and turning into a future all-star the same way they look at Keegan Murray and looked at Keegan Murray when they drafted him a couple of years ago. But I think it's fair to ask, do the Kings look at Devin Carter as potentially their long-term starting 2-guard? Because it's safe to say that position is not solidified. Kevin Huerter lost it. Keon Ellis had it and probably still has it, but he's just coming off of a 2-way contract. And I think we're all anxious to see, okay, what does he look like now after he's had that breakout season and teams are a little more familiar with him and expectations are only going up and getting higher for the Kings? Was that a flash in the pan, or can he actually develop and consistently be a starting 2-guard on a team that's not just trying to make the playoffs again, but is ultimately trying to compete for a championship one day? I think it's natural to have some skepticism that a guy who is undrafted, if he can be that. So there might be some belief within the Kings organization that not right away, but 2, 3, 4 years from now, hey, maybe Devin Carter is a perfect ideal starting 2-guard next to De'Aaron Fox. If he can space the floor and shoot the 3 at the 37% clip he had last year in college while also rebounding the basketball and being that presence on the defensive end that the Kings need more of, I get it. I could see it. Now I'm not predicting it, right? We're a ways off from that still. He has to prove that. And going into this season, I think the expectation for Devin Carter will be establishing himself with a consistent role as a 7th or 8th man coming off the bench along with Malik Monk. The expectation should be, even with Kevin Huerter on this roster, that Fox and Keon are going to be the day one starters at the point guard and the shooting guard spot, just the way the roster is. And then you have Monk, Huerter, and Carter coming off the bench, assuming that Huerter's still on this team. I'm very skeptical that that's going to happen. I don't think Kevin Huerter is going to be a part of this Kings roster for that much longer, if I'm being honest with you. But short term, there's belief that Carter can help the Kings win basketball games right now in a rotational role, but maybe long-term, Carter can be that starting caliber 2 guard that the Kings still haven't solidified yet. I'm going to have this conversation with Brendan Nunes from Sacktown Sports 1140 and Kings Pulse, because he and I were discussing this. We were sitting next to each other at the Golden One Center after the Kings made the pick, because he's very high on Devin Carter. Was telling me how high he was on Devin Carter well before the pick. He was one of the few guys in that room that was actually excited about the Devin Carter selection, and he helped me kind of come around to it a little bit more and open my mind to it a little bit more. But he is of the belief that a good portion of this pick, or a good reason behind making this selection, is because the Kings might feel that Devin Carter can be that long-term starting 2 guard for him. So we're going to have that conversation tomorrow on Locked On Kings. I'll release it tomorrow night. I'm set to record with him and chat with him tomorrow afternoon. Podcast will be out tomorrow night to go into your weekend. We'll talk about the possibility of Carter being a long-term starter. Plus, I have more great stuff coming for next week. If the Kings, of course, make any other moves, whether it's in the draft or free agency, we'll be all over it here on the Locked On Kings podcast. Great interviews coming for you around and about Devin Carter and the Kings' future and any moves that they can make. We're expecting a introductory press conference to be able to meet Carter in person. The Kings will have a free agency press conference where we'll likely get to talk to Malik Monk for the first time. A lot of great stuff is coming in the very near future here on Locked On Kings, and that's even before the California Classic and Summer League begins, which is right around the corner. So things are heating back up here to get us through these summer months, and I'm excited to spend the next few weeks, the entire rest of the offseason going into next season with you here on the Locked On Kings podcast. So I appreciate your support. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.